So we had a grounding of an NPC this time. Not sure what that's going to do in terms of where he goes back. We'll worry about that when next turn happens. However, Jake gets a turn finally where he gets to try to do something to whoever, Chris here. He can't recruit him. He doesn't have a high enough reputation in specific with Chris or at all. But he does have some other options. Brag, criticize, complain. Stealing won't work. There's nothing to take. Attack. Might work, but I'm not good at attacking Chris. I would be better off finding someone that I can beat up easier like Mayumi if I wanted to do that. Because she's a girl, you know. The only one, I think. Anyway. So the question is which to choose. And when I'm looking over these things, I'm beginning to see that generalism is kind of used in the sense that criticize, for some reason, not commend, criticize or praise or anything, is being used in sort of that general way with things that don't fit. And that's where kind of this discontinuity came from. One problem I have is I don't see a difference between criticize and brag in this case where there's only one character in the area. I can see having both of them, but either one has the same effect. I might not want to try something with everyone because I might make people unhappy. I gotta go pour some tea, unfortunately. I forgot and came up here while it was going. Well, I had to stir some potatoes as well. Cooking Thanksgiving dinner while I'm doing this. Just to give you a point of reference to where I am if you watch this, say, several years from now for some reason. So, looking at the different choices, really complain is an attempt, from what I can tell, to decrease other kids' view about someone else. It says you complain to someone, really you're complaining about them to everyone else. Brag is a way of making everyone like you more, or maybe dislike you. Criticize works the same way. Commend, I think, is a better one if you had it. More diplomatic. You tell someone they're good. Telling someone they suck or bragging to them is less likely to be a positive influence. But anyway, I'm going to do the criticize, and I have to roll a success. Well, what's a success? Equal to or lower than the NPC's perceptive attribute, which is going to be the average of my overall reputation and that particular character's look at me, which means I need a 1 through 3. I do not get it, which means I get Chris dislikes me. He thinks I suck worse than everyone else, actually. Okay, not very effective. I find that's sort of the problem with most of these intersocial abilities. I don't think they're going to provide too much value to Jake to have those, but maybe misinterpreting things. I don't feel like him going first is particularly that big an advantage either, especially when his abilities kind of suck. If he can't get people to use his money, he's just going to get left behind because he doesn't have the capabilities that all the other characters who are players have. Maybe the game master has to be careful in designing the game and not just randomize it. It would help with the printing is if the character counters, and especially the base area of them, maybe just the base, were colored the same as their counter there. Again, I don't know if that would cost more. It looks like there's a full 4-color printing in here. You could just kind of color the base piece and the bottom portion of the pieces with the same exact color that's used for their counter pieces, and that would help distinguish who's who. It's very hard, especially with my eyes, to do this except by the colors. Now in the lighting that I have, maybe the colors aren't enough, but because there are so many different colors that some of them have to be close to each other. But just another piece of advice towards the presentation of the game. See, in my head, the idea of a player aid, So for example here, and yeah, I'm trying to give advice more than anything else at this point. Let me just jump in and say what happened. Jeff moved over to Ducktown. He's going to apparently do something there. Go! He can't. He is not allowed to because he can't pay rent. There's a currency accepted there and he has no money. He could take out a loan. Yes. Yes. Rent is what? Ah, fuck. Okay, so something exciting happened. Let me talk about what I was thinking. When I see one, what I kind of envision is sort of a sheet with all the actions listed. So for example, a stock action and the division of the different choices based on PC or NPC if they can take that action, and then, you know, what choices they would have to make from there and what the effects are. The problem with that all is it probably would end up, because of how sparse the rule book is, about the size of the rule book. It would just be an implementation of the rule book in an easier to use format. You find an action, you trace down and see what it does. Not my favorite way of playing games, as you might know from my discussion of Coin, where I have to zone out on those charts and everything, but it might be the best way to express these relationships more easily, because they're kind of hard to capture in your head. And once you go through that flowchart or whatever for an action a couple of times, just like with Vietnam, it very quickly, you know, becomes internalized and you're just able to do it. You may have to look up to see a number or something. But yeah, unfortunately that would be another expense but then again, so would bulking the rule book out so that it's understandable and not just a set of notes. Okay. There might be a way to generalize the presentation on that chart and just say, look to the chart to understand how to do things. And then the rule book might be able to get down to one sheet of paper, really. Because it's really not very big as it is. It's 2 sheets of paper, 2.5 sheets of paper, both sides. Okay. So what were we looking at here? What happens if you have to take out a loan? What is the rent cost? And I need to find, and yep, this is what the game's about, looking these things up. Okay, so I would be taking out, I would be taking out a loan of, I would have to pay 1, I believe, to go there. I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find rent. Is that under travel or is it under something else? God. You can't move there. No, he wasn't able to move where he went. Fuck. Well, he's been screwing around doing nothing. He was not allowed to travel. And he wasn't allowed to last time either. The reasoning being he can only go here because he can't pay rent if he's allowed to by the NPC who owns it. So, yeah, he's pretty much unable to do shit. I guess he will do... he can't do anything very shortly because he can do the lounge action, but here's the problem. He can't do any of these actions. He can't do travel unless somebody lets him. He can't do any of these actions unless there's somebody nearby. He can't do stock because he doesn't have enough money to buy a stock, and he can't do currency because nobody will accept his currency, so he can't print more of it and lower its value. Which is why nobody will accept it. They don't want him to just print money. As it stands, he has printed as much as he's allowed to. And everybody's like, well, that's great. You got your own little currency, and nobody cares. Poor little Jake. So all he's allowed to do is lounge. And next turn, he will have to violate the rules, because he can't lounge twice in a row unless he gets grounded. I assume he can lounge. In that case. Boy, he sucks. Okay. But now let's take a look at this guy's travel action. Is he allowed to? Now he can go... He couldn't go here originally because he didn't have the money unless he allowed him to. And why would he allow him to? Well, I don't know. Maybe. But I see no reason to. Jeff, why would you allow Jeff to go here? Who are you? Kent. Yeah, you don't really want him there. So no. Until I form a currency and can take a loan. So here's the thing. Will he move here? And if he can't move somewhere, I have to roll and see if he can go somewhere different, I guess. I don't know. I have to fucking read all this to understand. The kid will have a perception or higher. The kid will attempt to go somewhere else. So he'll find somewhere to go. And he was somewhere else, and now he's trying to go to Ducktown. He can't. Why can't he? Because he can't pay the rent if I'm right about the cost of rent, if it's 1. We got to find that. Rent must be paid if they can't afford it. Okay, we got to find the rule on rent. This is where this game gets really horrible, is, you know, until you've figured all this out and internalized it completely, and there isn't that much, but the rule book doesn't help you to do so. It doesn't flow in a way that makes things make sense. And I got to check on my battery anyway, so we'll take some time and try to figure out what rent is. I think it's 1, in which case he can't fucking go there. Indeed, no player particularly wants to let Jeff go anywhere, so the only places he could end up showing up are Greg's or Chris's house. Now, I don't know what can happen with Greg, because Greg's not playing. So could you slip in there into his place while he's grounded? This isn't clear. Or can he collect rent while he can't interact with other players in any way? Again, not clear. Trying to look at it from the case of little kids. Hey, well, could he sneak into this family's house and do something there? Would he have to leave money behind, or could he just do shit there? It's hard to determine in my own head which one makes more sense. I'm not even sure he'd be allowed to come over, except that there are other kids of that household who aren't grounded. So, you know, it's not like the swing set or whatever this represents wouldn't be there. But then the question is he forced by the rules of the little game that they're playing to leave a rent? And, you know, is there an honor factor there? What would happen? I don't know. I could see all kinds of rules surrounding that kind of thing to try to represent that. The game obviously isn't that complicated. So the question is, does he leave the rent or does he not have to? And that's a binary choice with no guidance whatsoever in it. I'm growing a little disappointed with this in the sense that it is beginning to feel like there needs to be a lot more work on the development side, not just of the rules in the presentation, but of the game itself, that it is not ready for prime time and should not have been released in this format. Now, this has been around, I don't know, it's listed as from 2007, but I think it's just been released on GameCrafter fairly recently. 3 people have given it ratings with comments. Every single one of them is a 10. I'm sure they played it with the designer or, you know, one of the people involved in this rather than playing it elsewise. The other option, there are other players, the other people who have rated it less. Who knows, maybe one's just the inevitable, I give everything a 1 rating. And that may be enough to drop this down to what it is, about a 7 total. So maybe, I didn't look at who else rated it, just the 3 that give comments, because that's kind of what I look at. So it might have been an enjoyable situation, and people often tend to, you know, when they're with the designer of a game, even if they're not, you know, friends with the designer necessarily, they tend to say, oh, this was just a great experience because, you know, social interaction and crap like that. So I don't know. But certainly any type of playtesting type experience with it, this needs work. And I think it needs work beyond simply clarifying the rule book. It needs work in terms of making the game work a little better. So, for example, Jake, I don't see a way for him to operate under this circumstance in any decent fashion. Can I see a way that he'd be useful in anything else? No, maybe he's just an NPC. Maybe that's the best he can be, is kind of a dicky NPC. I don't know. But again, maybe there's a value to letting people come into your town. I don't think there is until you establish a currency. Until there's a printed currency in play at that town, because you're not going to collect rent otherwise. I don't see any reason to do it without establishing the currency. And, you know, until you print some of it, more than just establish it. Okay, so where the fuck am I? Good little kids game we talk about. Greg looks tardy. He is... Sorry, is that Greg? Is that Jeff? Who the fuck? Jeff. That's the green guy. So now we're on Greg Smith, who's orange. And I'll roll the die in front of him because what the hell. 7. He's going to travel somewhere too and probably can't do anything of any interest. He's grounded and wow. I swapped batteries and there's like no power left in this one. And that one was barely charging. So we'll see if we can get to the end of this turn without running out the battery. And that'll probably be up for a while. Help if I come back for every action. Chris got his action, a complain action. He is with someone, but a complain is you point to someone and say, that guy's an asshole. That's not going to do anything of effect because it affects other people's opinion of that other guy. So no, that's not going to do anything. Run into a problem. I was using these tracks to indicate stock value. I'm not sure that's what they're for. I think that's actually how many shares you have, which everybody should be at 1 share who did anything. I'm not sure where valuation goes, and I've got to figure that out. Maybe it's on your player track. Maybe that... What are these tokens supposed to be for? The octagons, and again, you know, if there was... This is used for kids' prestige, okay. What about the kid circles? Keeping track of opinions, areas, and debt and stock amounts on stock market map. Well, that's stock amounts. What is stock value? Because that's what we've increased, is stock value. I don't fucking know. And I really don't fucking know. But those should all be 1. I got to pay attention to them, though, because those numbers are the stock valuations, which maybe are down on currency value. I got to try to find that. This gets weird. The stock and commodity for keeping track of stock prices, stock ownership, and commodity amount. Okay, the circles keep track of how many you have. The numbered circles keep track of the stock value. Okay, so that's where we are, is that the stock value for E is at 4 and there's 1 there. So that's how we're doing this. And yes, I saw this on the players, on the designers video too. I just forgot about it. Another 4 there. Okay. Just a 1 there. And I don't know how high, if the values are limited to 10 actually, then they could go up to any amount conceivably, and I just killed Jake. Okay, so we were on Kent trying to figure out what the fuck he's gonna do. And he might as well work. because work is always a good thing to do, because now he increases his stock value, and this is harder to tell. I find the other thing easier to tell for stock value. I'd rather have stock certificates, to tell you the truth. He goes up 2. So he was at 4, he goes up to a 6, and probably we're going to see stock work being done by everyone. One reason that moving these forward would be better for stock value rather than ownership, and why I'd appreciate it that way instead of using the number markers for it, is a matter of quick assessment of the cost of stocks. For these, I have to lean in and start reading the numbers, and that's harder than just seeing position on a stock market track. Probably the best thing would be you know, a straight line stock market track and an actual little tiny certificates for the players. That would probably be the best way to represent these things. Of course, start adding components, you start adding the cost of the game, and you could make your own if you really wanted to. But that's something I'm not going to do, I don't think. Made it to the end of June, everybody worked. 6s for 2 of them, 7 for Scotty, who, you know, has an extra success there. So we got a couple of things where certificates would be useful. Stocks, because you're limited to only 10 stocks in the game. 10 issues of any stock in the game. If there's more than that, you know, if somebody wants to buy after that, they have to buy them from people. And the same thing with areas. Areas would also, within a neighborhood, would also maybe have some value if there were actual certificates given with them. That would allow the expansion of areas by adding pieces to the game, essentially, which would be areas within a neighborhood, which would be kind of a nice addition. But the biggest thing with that is you would have, say, a color-coded thing with high hills that shows the ownership of an area within that. I'm not quite sure what stocks represent and why there's a limit to the number of companies that can be created and stuff like that. Nope, we're only allowed 5 companies, you know. Sorry, you know, not sorry to Jake, who cannot create a company, but sorry to some of the other people who could work, who have not, oh, there's 1 left, who have not been able to create a company. And also sorry if your company gets taken over, you're not going to get to start a new company. Although I can kind of see that, but if somebody else, you know, if not everybody starts a company who can, it's possible that some of the people who could start companies will end up not being allowed to start them because someone else has bought out another person's company, and then the person who lost their company will start a company, and you know, you could just get run out of the opportunity to start one because there's this hard limit for no good reason. When I was young, we had games that were kind of like this. Like, we got to the point of we did adventures and battles and stuff like that, and the bowling pin bad guys. And we used to create money to go with that. Now, money just had its value. There was a single currency for our entire group, and it basically came to you as many times as you went to the bathroom. You always got paid for that because you could drink water. The family had a Dixie cup. You could drink, only one household that we played at, you could drink water out of the Dixie cup, and then you would rip the top part of the Dixie cup off and keep the rest of it as your coin, and we use those as currency within it. Much simpler than this, you know. But mainly they were payoffs for like lending support in battles or stuff like that. Okay, some similarities to this, but I don't remember it all that well. Anyway, everybody's gone. Everybody worked who could and got their stock values up. The problem that's happening right now is the fact that only 1 player has released a currency. No deals are being made amongst the currency. People who can build and stuff like that can build up the value of their stock. And now we've got NPCs, for example, Jeff here. Nothing exciting happened in the events. Jeff here, who rolled a stock action, and he can't do shit. He really can't. All he could do is potentially buy from here, but he can only borrow the 10 money that Jake has to buy that. Well, to buy a stock, and I actually don't think he can buy stock from anyone but Jake if he's doing that. I'm not sure of that. But anyway, even if he could borrow from Jake to buy, say, some of Chris's stock, which is only valued at 1, he would be paying 2 for it, and all he can come up with is 1/10 of a cent by going into Hawk. And the next player in line, the orange player, who is probably Greg, and I haven't figured out where he went. He wanted to buy stock as well. You can't take a loan as an NPC to buy stock. You can only do it to buy areas, which nobody has gotten the option to do. I don't remember how that happens. I believe it's if you get a build action and don't have anywhere to build is when you get to buy. Because I don't see a purchase option anywhere. And again, you know, I got to work through the rules, and each time an action comes up, which is a sign that all these different actions, I don't have a good grasp on them as a player when I'm playing the player actions if I don't know what they do. Of course, players and NPCs react to actions differently. In some cases, an NPC can do some things that a player can't, vice versa, which I find also kind of problematic to the design. Let me try to figure out where that fucktard got. Ended up at Chris's little domain, which he'll be allowed in because NPCs like NPCs to begin with. And he tries to give a gift, but again, no money in the system, so nothing happens. Maybe this will start to develop eventually, we'll see. But right now it seems like people, you know, I don't know how long I'm playing for, but everybody's kind of the opinion of, well, if I can just build and increase my stock value, I'm going to have the greater stock value. The only fill-up to that is the economic value of the currencies, and the only person who has a currency, it is almost worthless. So there's very little value to that. Here it goes up by 10, here it goes up by 5 times, no, twice, 5 times for some reason, twice, and then by less and less each time you increase the currency. So, and that has to do with releasing how much is going to come from it. Okay, so let's see where we are. We're trying to look here at Mayumi, and I'm looking again at this build action. So the way this is worded, you roll a 10-sided die. For success, the same number should be used as those for parental disaster dice based on the household strictness level. NPC's roll can be twice as high, so strict is a 1 or a 2, moderate is 1 through 4, friendly 1 through 6. Well, for parental disaster based on the strictness, well, that's actually wrong. Here, parental disaster happens if it's strict, you have to roll a 4 or higher. It makes it sound like it's actually easier to build a domain in a strict house. That doesn't sound like what he's attempting to say. So there's a misinterpretation here on one side or the other. The rules do not align properly. What I've been playing with is simply having these numbers. So if you want to succeed in a strict household, you need a 1, which of course makes things worse and worse for him. But that makes sense, you know, in terms of if it's a strict household, the parents aren't going to like you setting up all kind of goofy kid shit, you know, in some area of the yard or whatever. So that's what I've been using, but that does not align with how the rules are worded. There's a definite conflict between those two. and what I would say is a contradiction. Maybe the designer can come back and say, no, this is what I actually meant, but to my view, it looks like it's bullshit. Okay, so I don't even know. She didn't go. She's considering doing a build because, hey, oh no, we're on Kent here. He was considering doing a build, and he's kind of like, well, I don't know if I should, because I don't know what my odds are. And then I chase down the rolls, and they don't seem to say. The problem he's got is he is behind the 8-ball compared to other people. So he may want to release a currency and maybe try to work with Jake over here in order to maybe get an advantage over these others who currently have the edge on him. So after Kent releases his currency, cutting a deal to allow Jake's currency to be used here, both Mayumi and Scotty choose to do the same to cover. Now I did this with a die roll, but they're also working together, and they've shot their currencies up above for Kent's currency. Kent was like, no, I don't want to work with you guys. Well, that's dropped the value of his currency at this point. They would gladly work with him as well, getting their own currency values up higher so they can buy stocks and such not. There's not a lot of value right now. Anybody who has 10, well, 2 people who have 10, Scotty and Jake, can each buy, they have 1 cent worth of purchasing power. But that 1 cent worth of purchasing power won't let them buy a share of even the cheapest $1 stock, because again, we've focused more on the stock dealings than anything else, but there's just not enough money to buy a share is the problem, because you have to pay the next highest price and you drive the stock price up there. Therefore, and this is going to be where it's hard to tell how many stocks there are. So right now, there's 1 share in each, but as multiple people go in there, I'm going to have to constantly add that list of numbers to make sure it doesn't go over 10, and to find out how many shares there are and what that should do to the price and stuff like that. Again, not a great design compared to, say, I don't know, pips that you remove, like certificates that you remove from the track to indicate how many shares there are. Some minor things, but they could make the game much, much easier to actually play. Now, in terms of valuations, you'll notice that Jake went way up. Everybody was willing to deal with him. He seems to be screwed. What the hell, He can buy not a share of stock yet. Now, if he can get his price up another one, but how would he do that? He can't work anywhere. He can't build anything. As far as I know, he can't buy property. I'm not sure how you do that. I think that's the build action if there's nothing available. There is a purchase action, but nobody has it. Oh, he does. So he's the only person who can straight up purchase things. Other people can only get there by the build action. Jake can't get there, period, the end. He just doesn't have the abilities to do it. He has no way to get additional property. And if, as he certainly will, his property will be destroyed eventually by his parents, someone else can go in and become chief of that. And then he loses even his ability to control, one little currency, whether or not it's accepted. And everybody pretty much could say, yeah, you know what? Jake's currency's garbage. Screw it. He has nothing to back it up. Right now, everybody's willing to back it up based on this idea of a mutual agreement. But eventually, he's going to just be a banker with nothing. He really looks like a screwed position. And yeah, only one person has the purchase opportunity, which means shit, man. Now, I don't know. Maybe players aren't supposed to be limited. I thought they were by what's on the chart. If they're not, well, then they can do whatever the fuck they like. And these actions, you know, these cards are not the right cards that players should have, right? Players should have a card that indicates each action once so they can keep a mark and keep track of what they did last. Otherwise, you're going to forget what you did last. I believe, though, that given that the lounge, something discussed that. Let me just see. Any action listed on the mat of their kid, yeah. So Jake is just screwed, basically. He is a really lousy character to be. At least with my limited understanding of the game. I don't see how much he can do. He might be able to gain currencies from people, but he will never get more property, and he will eventually lose his property over the course of time. These other characters all seem fine. They will not be purchasing territory, but they will eventually be able to purchase things when they build someplace that there's nothing they can build. And then I think maybe that's only NPCs that happens to. Nope, only NPCs are allowed to purchase. No. Players are always allowed to purchase instead of build, I guess, if they have the build skill. So yeah, so these other characters, these other kids are going to have a chance to do something useful in order to increase their capacity to work and stuff. And it's not like he can work either. He's just a really, really weird kid. His kids probably, or his parents probably bought him like, you know, a cool play set, you know, and that's what this represents. And other people want to go and play in it, but it's possible that it would, like, you know, get cleaned up or something, and then he can never make it into the proper thing again, and he needs to wait for somebody else to build it, and then he'll never own it and never be able to. He's not really able to gain much advantage from it either. Luckily, he doesn't have things like tax or anything like that, but he does have stock. Puts him as an investor, I guess. I don't know. He just seems like a very, very weak character, unless everybody sees him as so weak that they help him out, that they do good things like connect up with him. But right now, I don't, those good things may be, hey, the only thing I have is my damn currency, so I am not going to let you have your bonus on here unless I get better, because I have just nothing else that I can try to trade. And other people will say, screw that, man, early in the game, like now, but at a later point, it might be important enough for them to shift up one that it might be worth letting him shift up two, or giving him a couple bucks to shift up. Although, one of the things that I mentioned in my suggestions about the game is clearly delineate what and if you can trade anything at all outside of normal, course of action within the rules. The only thing that I see that you're allowed to actually trade kind of freely is whether or not you accept a currency. I don't think you can give money away. I don't think, you can do all kind of things. And fuck, my battery looks like it's green again, which means it's probably not charging, and I'm pretty sure it needs to. Anyway, we went through another turn, and we're into August, and not much seems to be happening. Well, now Jake ends up releasing more currency. That drops his value down to 0.05. However, he has 20 of them, so he actually will have enough to start buying stock now, playing with his currency. With $4, he could actually buy even a more valuable stock, a $2 stock for $3, and raise the value of that if he likes. Or he could just buy the cheapest stuff out there. hoping it'll go up. Which seems likely. There are a lot of people playing around in Chris's world, so that sounds interesting. Over with the NPCs, good old GL did a lounge action. GS, Greg Smith, he's over here. He got a work action. Okay, that's fine and dandy. If he had any areas here, he could work for any company he liked. I think he would default to his own if possible, but or when he has stocks in, but he doesn't have any areas there, so he essentially does nothing. And now to Chris, who might be very interesting, Chris is going to travel somewhere. Great. Somebody who could have caused interesting things to happen. No, he's going to leave his area. Finish things up. Kent goes from that currency to a work action, which allows him. He maybe had enough money to buy a share. He probably should have if he did. I'm trying to figure out what his money's worth. His money's worth shit. No, he didn't have enough. And if he prints more money, he doesn't get anything. The only way he can get more is by getting an in into somebody else's territory, which doesn't look like it's happening. The only way it happens is by him boosting other people. And they're kind of like, sure, we do that. But he's like, nah, this money thing didn't work. He does a work action, increases the value of his shares to $8 each, which, since everybody's got one, he's got $8 or 8 cents and an extra penny. So he's at 9. If we look elsewhere, these two both built. Mayumi failed, but Scotty succeeded. And the reason they built, well, again, I did die rolls on that. Mayumi, the build was less of an important facet, but with Scotty, I was like, I think I actually skewed it more towards work, but he chose to build instead. And he succeeded, which is a big deal, because that means when he works, he'll be adding 4 to his value and jumping well ahead of Kent over here, for whatever that means. And that gets us into September. The main problem that I see is with this whole mechanism, and maybe I'm missing something that I would not put behind, I wouldn't put that beyond my capabilities, is that the easiest way to get victory points in this game is to do that build work combination and then just do works. Eventually, building's not going to allow you to keep increasing, your village, your holdings in one village. But at this point, as long as I can keep increasing my builds and do the works, and I don't see any limitation on stock value, you're going to be able to pump your stock prices through the roof. And stock prices are just so much easier to obtain. Now, if we were playing with all 7 characters as players and no NPCs, maybe things would be different, because maybe there would be enough action going on in these that the chiefs would allow more currencies in. But with all the people who don't produce currencies as NPCs, basically there's no reason, there's no way of convincing them easily to allow those currencies in. So the currency values are being depressed. So again, that may be the nature of the particular scenario that I've got built, but it really does feel like it's very easy to just do this work build, and pump your stock prices up. As long as, you have a share. If you're not the only person with a share in something, then it becomes more complicated. And the way the rules are set, which is totally non-intuitive, that like the president can't buy a share of something unless somebody else has a share of his stock. And to do so, he has to pay money to the other shareholders, which kind of makes sense because he's diluting the stock. But other people just pay him money and he prints out stocks, which all seems kind of funny. So I don't know. I feel like I just, I feel kind of bewildered by the whole design in terms of what it's possibly representing, and whether it's just this really weird abstract type of economy that I shouldn't be trying to link, that the kids were all fucking doped up so hard when they made this, or just didn't understand, how real economies work, that they designed something, and that's what's being represented here, is something that's like not a real world situation at all, and not meant to represent one correctly, and that this weird economy is one that maybe later on they started saying, wow, there was something really funky there, and that's what's trying to be captured by this game. Unfortunately, the rules don't help you discern that, whether or not that's the case. And if that is the case, they really should help you along that side of, don't expect this to work like a normal economy. It has some real weird connotations behind it. Unlike, say, Crusoe's Planet, which seems pretty fucking weird when you start looking at it, but then you start realizing there is a real economy in play there, and one that kind of makes some sense. This one, not so sure. I don't know what it means that, like, I don't know. Some of it seems pretty clearly linked, like, hey, you start printing too much money, you decrease the value of the currency, however you have more of it. But on the other hand, if it was a real currency, printing more money would never give you more capital than you had. It's like printing more stocks. There's an inherent value to something, and you're creating a division of what that value is. To some extent, currency was backed by gold or whatever, if it's paper currency, gold and silver, and you start printing more of it, and whatever it is that currency is based on, you have a smaller share of that, whatever it is. Now it's more GDP or whatever. But still, you start printing too much currency, the currency devalues. However, it does so in ways that I don't think the kind of gamesmanship that makes it possible to make big jumps on this track are at all reasonable. Random events in September or whatever, assuming I'm keeping track of time properly. Scotty is, and nothing happens. Scotty is choosing to do a stock action. And he's going to buy a share of B, which is Chris's stock. He doesn't have to be near him, I don't think, to do that. That raises the price to 2. Now I owe $2. Well, to the president. $2. Fuck. $2. My money's worth a half, or 2 cents. My money's worth a half cent each, which means I have to give, no, not a half cent each, 0.05 cents each, which means to get $2, I have to pay 10, right? I don't know. No, that doesn't sound right. To get $2, I have to pay, let's see, 4 would get me to 0.02. 40 would get me to 2. Wait, what? Maybe I don't have enough money. I have 20 times half is 10. No, I only have $1. Screw that. I can't do this, I don't think. Let's get that back. I thought I was doing something. I thought I had enough money. Let's see. I have 0.05 per. 0.05 times 20 is either 1 or 10. It is 1. Yeah, I have $1. That is not enough that I can buy a share of that stuff. Now, I think I could take out a loan, but I don't want to take out a loan to buy something that Chris over here is running, because it's really unlikely he's going to increase the value of it. Of course, if I could work, then I could go out and increase the value of it. But if I could work, I would have my own damn stock. So I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with Jake still. What did he do? He did currency last time. I don't know what he's doing this time. But there are people with money. Maybe I can go steal. Except if I go someplace, I gotta pay I gotta pay rent to get there. Fuck. One thing Jake would like to do is maybe try to talk to Scotty. Scotty has the one area that Jake does not have a yellow cube in, that he could put one in. However, there are no rules one way or another as to what can be exchanged and when, except for one thing, which is giving loans, I think. You can give loans to one another. And that's why I say, gee, it would be nice if I could know if I could just transfer currency as part of a deal. Or maybe I could sell areas, not spelled out. If I felt like the game was very freeform and didn't have a lot of restrictions based on where you are and what's going on and everything, that would be believable. As it is, that's all missing. I feel like I've got part of the game here, but I'm missing the piece of the game. Maybe there should be a rule that I can cut deals wherever I want. Can I call him up and say I'll transfer, some money? Or are these real little kids and they have to be next to each other to do it? Or is this currency just not applicable for buying territories? Can you just not purchase and sell territories? No, I'm sorry. The one thing that you're allowed to do at all times is Scotty would be allowed to allow Jake in there. The question is, there is no rule on whether or not I can transfer cash to do so. I'm going to say I can, but I'm making shit up here. Maybe not that much, because I think the designer's video shows something similar to that, where money or something was exchanged. I don't know what, but can I just print up stocks and hand it to somebody? I mean, what the hell, If I own the company, why not? Why do I have to sell stocks? What effect would that have on the stock market if I'm doing that? I don't know. I don't know a damn thing about this game because the rules are simply not nailed down enough to cover what's going on. Maybe they're nailed down enough for the person who made up the game to be able to make rulings based on things. I've been in games like that. I've run games like that. Generally role-playing games. This might make a good role-playing game. Maybe that's why there's a game master in it who sets up the scenario. He also makes up the rules. Well, what do I need these rules for? I don't know. Whatever. But yeah, I feel like cash should be fairly fluid. So I'm going to pretend that that rule exists. I'm not sure about other kinds of rules I want to make up, like being able to transfer stocks. Can I sell you a stock? Can I sell you a stock outside of a stock turn between players without it being using all the mechanisms in it? Why not? If it was a real situation, it would make sense. But the rules don't seem to allow for that kind of transfer. And obviously games like 18xx don't allow for it either. However, I don't expect the kids who designed this originally to have put that kind of situation in play. I would think that they would say, well, you issued these stocks. I can sell them privately. I can transfer them. They're goods. That's how the real world works, right? Why put these other weird mechanisms in play? There's been some reason to do that. And I don't understand that, and since I can't comprehend it, I can't tell whether or not I'm violating some basic precept of the game, even by transferring the money. But anyway, let's say I'm willing to give some cash. Like I said, I saw an example of that in my brief look at the videos, to be able to be allowed in here. Well, then we have to kind of negotiate a price. And it's an obvious advantage to Scotty. Scotty. Green, but he's not green. His counter should be green so to match his pieces in some way or another, in order to make this evaluation as to whether or not I'd let him in. And what's a fair value there? Well, that's hard to tell. Because if I'm letting him in and I'm getting any of his currency, my letting him in improves his currency value. I think, given everything, I should get about 10 of it. Well, if I take 10 of it, Scotty doesn't have enough to make his stock purchase. How much does he need to make a stock purchase? He needs all 20. Well, we're fucked. Scotty probably can't do anything there, but he keeps looking. And his other things involve traveling and paying all of his cash to someone or not being able to travel. And there aren't any places he particularly wants to go where he can legitimately go that would cost all of his cash. Places that accept his crap as currency. And in which case, of course, he'd just print more currency, decrease the value of it so that he didn't actually pay so much. And, but he doesn't gain much from that. On the other side of it, he cannot go to any of the NPCs, which is where he might want to go, because he's got all kinds of things he can do to NPCs. Now, he could pay all his money and then try to steal it back, or pay all his money and try to fight for it back. But what does that gain him? And what does it help him to be in one of these places? So none of this makes any sense. What he'd like to do is complain because the game sucks for him. But instead, I guess he'll just rest. And I do not think we're going to go much further than this video. In fact, I think this is the last turn I'm playing. I don't think the game makes a damn bit of sense as written. So, where did we get? Well, the NPCs tried to do interesting things. I don't remember who did what. Jeff did... He did a lounge, I think. Greg, though, actually succeeded in building something here in Chris's territory, which is kind of cool. Now people can go there and pay him rent instead of Chris if they so desire. Chris decided to commend, but he had no one to talk to. So he was, because he's off alone somewhere else. And then as we move on, for the players, well, they continued with the build work routines, shooting up values, and Scotty's up to 11. And I mean, I don't see anything that's going to stop this. Could there be some kind of ganging up on someone? Sure, maybe there could, but it just feels like what I was hoping for here, which was an interesting economic model, isn't working out to be that. I'm going to give this some thought as to whether or not I want to keep going. I hate to bail on what is a review copy, but this also doesn't feel like it's a real game yet. It feels like it needs a lot of development work. It feels like it needs design work still as well. I mean, it feels like there are key elements that are just not here yet. But there's also stuff like, unanswered questions that are just, too clear. Is there something interesting here? Maybe. I'm not sure. There are some intriguing ideas. So I like I pointed out, I like the idea that you have this two-factor reputational type thing. A general reputation. And, I kind of had something like that, which was sort of, based kind of on Crusader Kings, which my game has certain... Basically, I was trying to make Popes and Princes in a more playable version. And Crusader Kings is essentially a computerized version of what Popes and Princes should have been. Well, Popes and Princes has kind of this general, faith and goodness type thing, which would be equivalent to a prestige type value. But they didn't interact in quite the same way. The only opinion counter that really mattered was the actual opinion that certain characters had of you. And some characters might take your faith into account. When that goes up, they might increase their personal opinion of you, but not everyone would. And that seemed to make some sense. But again, it was all very nebulous. And, you know, I would love to hand the idea off to someone, but it doesn't even make sense as a game. And that's the problem with this, is I think it kind of may just not be something that can be reasonably simulated. Not that a small scale economy like this couldn't be. It certainly could be, but that the choices made as to say how stocks seem to work, how currencies seem to work, they get in the way of being able to design a working system, which is to say you can design a working system that's a model of a real system, but I don't think this was ever a real system. Like, I don't know if the kids ever had something nailed down well enough that it could be modeled. Or that if you can always say they did, right? Because they had something that was working, but that it's anywhere near as simple as even a normal economic system, because it may have depended on whims that involved things like, oh no, real economics don't work this way, so we're changing the rules now. I think we push this forward. Yeah, I'll send this up and I will think about whether or not I want to come back. And I don't know if it makes sense to give a review for this if I don't come back, because a lot of what I've said is really directed at the designer more than anything else. But to give a peek at something, maybe this can be massaged into something that's workable. But it was certainly way too early to try selling in the condition it's in. Way too early.